Hello and welcome to Real Life, Real People, Real Impact. I'm your host, Daksh, and I'm incredibly excited about today's conversation. We are diving into a book that has fundamentally shifted how many people think about leadership, relationships, and personal growth. And before we begin, views and opinions expressed in this webinar are that of our own and not of our employer. And I'm thrilled to be joined by an expert in this field, my co-host for today, Jennifer Kested. Meet Jennifer, a partner at IBM Consulting, where she leads the UK and Ireland finance transformation practice. She spent the last 20 years helping organizations rethink how finance works, half in consulting, half in industry. So she really understands both sides of the table. She started out with more than a decade in financial services, and since then, she's broadened her impact across consumer products, defense and security, pharma, you name it. What I love about Jennifer's approach is that she challenges clients to look beyond what is and imagine what could be, aligning every move to the bigger enterprise strategy. She's led some serious end-to-end transformation programs, finance transformations, legal entity restructurings, target operating models, future of finance designs, and shared services, partnering with CXOs of various companies to optimize operations, drive growth, and unlock value. Jennifer is also a true people champion. She's helped shape the culture of her practice and is a strong voice for diversity, equity, and inclusion, making sure awareness turns into action. She is an alum of Syracuse University's Maxwell School of Citizenship and a proud member of the Lead Women's Network. Please join me in welcoming our guest host, Jennifer Kested. Jennifer, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for having me, Daksh. This is one of my all-time favorite topics, and your very generous introduction of me makes me feel like maybe I've done something around this topic in my life. So thank you so much for that gracious introduction. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Excellent. So today we are unpacking Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. This isn't your typical leadership book filled with step-by-step formulas. Instead, it uses a powerful parable to reveal a hidden obstacle that sabotages our effectiveness, both as leaders and as human beings, self-deception. Jennifer, before we get into the nitty-gritty, why do you think this book, first published over 2 decades ago, continues to resonate so deeply with leaders today? I think that's a great starting point, Daksh. For me, it's because it's a core problem, and it identifies one that is universal and also timeless. We all have this blind spot when it comes to our own contributions and our problems. And there's actually a saying that we judge others by their outcomes and we judge ourselves by our intentions. And I think this book gives a language and a framework to see that blind spot. It's like getting a pair of glasses for your conscience. A pair of glasses for your conscience. I love that. Well, let's hand those glasses out to our audience. We're going to start by exploring the central metaphor of the book, what Arbinger calls the box of self-deception. So the entire book revolves around this idea of being in the box. Jennifer, can you break this down for us? What exactly is the box? Absolutely. If you think of the box as a state of self-deception. So when I'm in the box, I'm seeing other people not as people, but as objects, as obstacles or vehicles, or simply irrelevant to my needs, because my needs are most important. And so therefore, I'm only conscious of what I actually need. And the key indicator that I'm in the box is that I'm betraying my own sense of what I should do for another person. I might feel a slight urge to help, to listen, to be kind, but I ignore it for some reason. And to quiet my conscience for what I've chosen not to do, I start to blame them. I inflate their faults, and I also inflate my own virtue. So it's this cycle of self-justification. That's powerful. So it's not just about being wrong. It's about actively deceiving ourselves into thinking we are right. The book gives a simple but profound equation, doesn't it? Let's put it on our screen for our viewers. So it starts with an invitation, a moment where I could choose to see someone's humanity. But if I betray that instinct, I must create a story where my betrayal was justified. That story is the box. Exactly. And the scary part is that we're usually the last ones to know that we're in that box. We think that we're being completely reasonable, and the box is an inward focused state. So you contrast that with being out of the box. When I'm in the box, if you look at your object here, your graphic,
On the left-hand side, you see other people as obstacles. You feel stuck, defensive, blaming. You invoke resistance and conflict in others. And I don't know about you, Daksh, but I know, and I love this book because it came for me at such an important point in my kind of life and career. But I found that I was like annoyed about almost everything, which is not a really nice place to kind of be, in peace. When you're out of the box, and has to be a conscious decision, you really have to kind of work at this. You do start to see other people with needs, hopes, and fears, just like myself, right? I start to feel responsive and curious and responsible. I'm a better human being, quite frankly. And I also invite collaboration and openness, which, when you are in the box, or also you feel under pressure, right? The more you are under pressure, the more you're in a demanding kind of role or personal scenario, you tend to default more readily to being in that box than you do to being out of the box, it's a really important point to have in your mind, I think.
This is so practical, Jennifer. It moves leadership from a set of behaviors to a fundamental way of seeing the world. It's not about what you do, but who you are in the moment of interaction.
Exactly. And that's why techniques often fail. You're not going to pull out a manual and go, when I'm doing this, I must do that, right? If I'm in the box, trying to use an active listening technique comes across as being really manipulative. People can feel that I'm objectifying them, if you will. Getting out of the box has to come first.
So thank you, Jennifer, for this. So let's now talk about the direct impact on leadership. The book introduces another critical concept, collusion. Jennifer, how does collusion play out in a team or organization?
I always get nervous when this word is mentioned because of what we do, Daksh, and it has a very different kind of connotation. But let me answer in the context of this book, right? So collusion in this instance is the dysfunctional dance, if you will, that happens when two or more people are in their respective boxes. And it's, another vicious cycle. So for example, a manager in the box might see an employee as lazy, and then they micromanage, which feels justified to that employee. Meanwhile, the employee feels distrusted, disrespected, and then gets into their own box and sees the manager as a controlling jerk. So that employee stops working as hard. They withdraw that effort, and then the manager sort of sees that as proof, right? So they're kind of reinforcing this behavior that they're actually complaining about the other one about.
It's like a feedback loop of misery. And the standard advice would be for the manager to manage better or for the employee to be more proactive. But that just treats the symptoms. The root cause is that both are self-deceived and in the box.
I think that's right. And it's not for one person to change their behavior, but for one person to get out of the box. And just to be clear, this getting out of the box, it's a mindset shift, right? Because, and I think that's important is, it's not just a behavior change because you don't in your heart feel as though you've done anything wrong. You really have to change your mental state to stop that colluding. And then when one person stops seeing the other as an object, it changes that entire system. It breaks that cycle.
So the most important leadership move might not be an action, but a shift in perception, a decision to see your team as people. Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but the million-dollar question is how? When I realize I'm in the box, how do I get out? The book is clear that you can't just decide to get out, right?
That's right. You can't just flip a switch or turn on a tap or turn off a tap. The box is a state of that self-deception. You really can't think your way out of a problem you're thinking your way into. The way out has to be through that change of heart. It is about being willing to see the other person as a person. So if you think about Arbinger's book, if we flick back to that, there's a few key steps that are recommended. The first one is about looking for the signs. So am I feeling blamed? Am I blaming others? Am I feeling stuck? Am I, constantly that constant aggravation that I was talking about? The second step is to recall your humanity, which is, that's a pretty heavy statement, but if you remember a time when you saw that person as a person, what were their challenges? What were their hopes? What were their fears? And really making sure that you appreciate them as a human being. And then thirdly, it's acting on that insight. So do you sense what you should do for them? Even if it's small, it could be simple asking a genuine question or offering help to that person, because you really then start taking that to a human level.
Yeah, it's I think it's about honoring that initial impulse that you betrayed that got you in the box in the first place. Jennifer, can you share a simple example of what getting out of the box might look like in everyday work situation?
Absolutely. So imagine you're frustrated with a colleague who missed a deadline or misses many deadlines, right? In some cases. So, you're in the box and you're fuming, right? Because you're thinking they're so unreliable. Do they not know, everything else that I have going on? And I'm here trying to chase them for this deadline. But to get out of that, you need to pause, which is very, very difficult when you're under, stress, you're under pressure, you're under time pressure. But you have to also think, maybe they have a sick child at home. Maybe they're stressed too. And then instead of sending that really strongly worded email, you walk over or you pick up the phone and you say, hey, look, I know things are tough. How can I get us back on track? And that shift really changes everything. And don't underestimate how difficult that is to do, right? Everybody can be a keyboard warrior sometimes. But a great question to start with is, what are the needs, objectives, and challenges of this other person or this team? And you don't have to say that aloud, right? This is a self-reflection kind of question. But before you walk into a difficult meeting, before you send a critical email, before you give feedback, pause and genuinely ask yourself that question. The act of considering those people or that person's humanity is often the very thing that lifts you out of that box. Another powerful one is, how have I contributed to this problem? Because it forces you to look inward rather than outward.
This truly has been fantastic, Jennifer. Now, let's tackle a couple of questions that often come up. First, a big one. Is it possible to be out of the box all the time?
I'm sure the Dalai Lama is probably out of the box all the time, or, maybe the Pope, or I wish I could say yes, but maybe. But, in my experience, no. I'm not as good of a person probably as those humans are, but it's a moment by moment choice. The goal isn't perfection, but it's awareness. It's a skill that's recognizing more quickly when you've slipped into the box and knowing how to find your way out. It's a practice like mindfulness.
Yeah, great. And another common question, this seems very focused on individual responsibility. What about toxic cultures or systems that seem designed to put people in the box?
It's a great point, Daksh, because systems can be box enforcing. But the Arbinger philosophy and that of the great Mahatma Gandhi, which is, quite apt because we're in an Indian holiday period at the moment. But the change starts with me or with you or, with the self. And even in that toxic system, when one person chooses to get out of the box, it creates a ripple effect. They stop concluding with that dysfunction. It's the only lever that we truly have direct control over.
And as we wrap up, what is the one biggest takeaway you hope our audience leaves with today from leadership and self-deception?
I'd say this. The most significant barrier to your leadership effectiveness is likely the one that you can't see. Your own self-deception. The path to better results, better relationships, and more peace isn't about changing others, because you'll try to do that for your entire life. But it's about changing your own way of seeing. Get out of that box. The most important message is that your influence as a leader is a direct result of your heart's posture toward your people. They know when you're being disingenuous. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you're in the box toward the people that are meant to execute that strategy, you 100% will fail. Focus on getting yourself right first, and then when you lead from outside of that box, you invite others to get out of theirs, and that's really where sustainable transformation happens.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for your incredible insights today. This has been truly enlightening conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Daksh. It was an absolute pleasure.